It started on a cold October night in 2005 at a quiet university town in Pennsylvania. 18-year-old freshman Lily Hart left her dorm at Bramble Ridge University after receiving a short phone call. She told her roommate she was meeting someone from her department and would be back soon. She never returned. Her bike stayed locked behind Morton Hall. Her wallet and ID were untouched in the room. The last ping from her phone came near an abandoned railway bridge, a place students called Iron Gate Road. The temperature dropped below freezing that night. By morning, Lily was gone. Search teams combed through the woods, the quarry, and the frozen ravine. Nothing. No footprints, no torn fabric, no trace of where she went. Rumors spread across campus. A secret club, a professor with influence, and a test that went too far. The university called it a tragedy. Her family called it a cover-up. And for nearly 2 decades, that silence held. Then, in 2021, an anonymous letter arrived at a state bureau office with just 9 words. Check the old Hale orchard cistern. She didn't leave. What investigators found there would reopen one of Pennsylvania's most haunting college disappearances and reveal a network of secrets buried deeper than anyone imagined. Stay with us as we uncover how Lily Hart vanished, how the truth was buried, and how one letter finally broke 18 years of silence. Like, subscribe, and share this story, because in the next chapter, we trace her last known steps on that freezing night near Iron Gate Road. It was a cold October night in 2005 at Bramble Ridge University, a quiet campus tucked into the hills of central Pennsylvania. The air carried the kind of early frost that settled on windows and left trails across the lawns. For most students, it was just another Sunday night. Books open, music in dorms, lights flickering behind old brick walls. But for one freshman, 18-year-old Lily Hart, it was the last night anyone would see her alive. That weekend, the temperature dropped hard. Early snow dusted the hills around town. Students stayed inside, watching movies or calling home. Around 9:40 p.m., Lily's phone rang. Jenna later told police it was a short call, maybe 30 seconds. Lily sounded calm. She put on her parka, slung her gray backpack over one shoulder, and said, "I'm meeting someone from my department. I'll be back soon." Then she walked out. A student on the 3rd floor saw her heading down the stairs alone. Security footage from a library camera caught a blurry figure matching Lily's build walking toward the north gate, the direction of the old railway bridge, a place students called Iron Gear Road. It was an off-limits area after dark, known for broken fences and steep ravines. That was the last confirmed sighting of Lily Hart. At 10:07 p.m., her phone stopped transmitting. The signal vanished just past the Iron Gate intersection. No outgoing calls, no text, no data activity after that. When Jenna woke the next morning, Lily's bed hadn't been slept in. She assumed maybe Lily had stayed in a friend's room. But by 8 a.m., when Lily missed her biology lab, she started to worry. Lily was punctual, borderline obsessive, one classmate said. Missing 2 classes without notice was completely out of character. Jenna tried calling again, straight to voicemail. At noon, she went to the dorm supervisor. Campus security checked Lily's room. Her bike was still locked behind the hall. Her wallet, ID, and keys were neatly stacked on her desk. Her laptop sat open, screen frozen on an unfinished essay saved the night before at 9:35 p.m. There was no sign she had packed to leave, no note, no evidence of planning. By evening, Bramble Ridge police opened a missing person file, classifying it as a suspicious disappearance. Officers canvassed the dorm and nearby areas, questioning students and staff. No one had seen her after that walk toward the north gate. The next morning, Lily's parents, Michael and Diane Hart, arrived from San Diego. They stood outside Morton Hall wrapped in heavy coats, handing out flyers with their daughter's photo. Brown helicopters were called in for thermal scans. Nothing. No heat signatures, no signs of struggle, no fabric caught on the brush. Investigators later said, "It's like she walked into the trees and just stopped existing." Lily's belongings became their only timeline. Her camera bag, field notebook, and research samples were all in her dorm. She hadn't been working on any outdoor projects that week. Police ruled out the theory of a spontaneous hike. By the third day, local media picked up the story. Headlines read, "College freshman vanishes after mystery call." News vans parked outside the campus gates. Students shared theories online. Maybe a boyfriend, maybe a club initiation, maybe something else. One student posted on an early campus forum, "Someone said she was invited to some science thing off campus that night." Investigators chased every rumor. They checked bus stations, car rentals, and nearby motels. Nothing. No credit card activity, no social media posts. The only lead remained that brief phone call at 9:40 p.m. Records showed it came from an unregistered prepaid cell phone. No owner, no further calls, and no usable data. On campus, fear replaced curiosity. Morton Hall residents requested room transfers. Parents started calling the university demanding extra security patrols. Professors were told not to discuss the case in class to avoid panic. Meanwhile, Lily's parents turned the search into their full-time mission. They raised money for private investigators, distributed flyers across Pennsylvania, and appeared on regional TV. Michael Hart told one station, "If she was hurt out there, someone knows. Someone saw her." By the end of the first week, nearly 100 volunteers had combed through every accessible area within a 5-mile radius. Search dogs, drones, and cadaver units found nothing. The only consistent clue remained the same: that faint phone signal ending near Iron Gate Road, a dead zone surrounded by forest and abandoned industrial ground. Students organized a candlelight vigil that Friday night at the North Gate. Photos of Lily lined the sidewalk, candles, and as the first frost hardened the ground around Bramble Ridge, the town began to settle back into routine. Students returned to class. The press moved on. But inside Morton Hall, the door to room 312 stayed closed. A small white notice taped beside it. Missing person, Lily Hart. Last seen October 24th, 2005. That was the night a freshman vanished, and the silence that followed would last 18 years. By sunrise, no one had found a single trace of Lily Hart. The frost had hardened overnight, sealing the ground and freezing over any footprints that might have been there. On the morning of October 25th, 2005, Bramble Ridge woke to the kind of headline small towns think they'll never read. College freshman missing after mysterious call. The police station lights were on before dawn. Officers from Bramble Ridge PD met with the local fire department and the state's forest rescue team. 3 primary search zones were marked on the map pinned to the wall. the eastern woods near the residential area, the Red Hollow Quarry to the west, and the narrow stretch of Iron Gate Road that ran toward the abandoned railway bridge. The last place Lily's phone had pinged before going dark. By 9 a.m., teams were moving out. Volunteers gathered near Morton Hall with flashlights and first aid kits, some still wearing pajamas under their jackets. The temperature hovered just above freezing, the ground slick with ice and dead leaves. The rescue dogs barked, impatient to work, their handlers guiding them into the dense pines. Above, a civilian helicopter circled the quarry line, scanning for heat signatures or movement. It was a race against time and against the weather. By mid-afternoon, the wind picked up, pushing the chill below -5 degrees Celsius. The snow had turned to sleet, coating the trees in glassy layers that cracked underfoot. Investigators noted that Lily hadn't taken her heavy coat. "If she's out there hurt," one officer told a reporter, "the clock's against us." As hours passed, it became clear how little they had to go on. The dogs followed a faint scent north of campus, tracing a winding path through. Back at campus, police sealed off room 312 in Morton Hall. They photographed every corner: the neatly made bed, the open laptop, the folded backpack. Her camera bag and field notebook were still there, along with a stack of photos showing the northern trail she had taken just 2 days before she vanished. IT staff pulled her login data from the campus server. Her last activity was at 9:35 p.m., 15 minutes before that phone call. Afterward, silence. No email, no instant message, no sign of voluntary departure. The official report noted simply, "No indication of intent to leave campus." Detectives began interviewing students. 23 were questioned: classmates, dorm residents, and library staff. One sophomore, Patrick Ewan, told police he saw Lily walking quickly toward the stairs that night. "She looked focused," he said, "like she was trying not to be late for something." Another witness, a library guard, confirmed the timestamp. The camera caught a shadow moving north at 9:47. Could have been her, hard to tell in the dark. Around midnight, a local hunter called in a tip. He'd been near the quarry lodge, about half a mile from Iron Gate Road, when he heard what he described as a faint call for help. The sound came from the direction of the bluff but stopped after a few seconds. Search teams returned the next morning with dogs. Again, no results. By then, fear had spread through the university. Bramble Ridge issued a campus-wide email warning students to stay indoors after dark. But the community refused to sit still. That Saturday, more than 60 students and residents formed a volunteer search party. News footage showed long lines of people walking shoulder to shoulder through the woods, their flashlights cutting through the fog. One student later told a local station, "It felt like the whole town was out there, but she was nowhere." Michael and Diane Hart, Lily's parents, arrived that weekend. They joined the search personally, trudging through mud and frost alongside police. The father met with the police chief and urged him to expand the search perimeter to include the western neighborhoods and nearby artificial lake. At the family's first press. Meanwhile, the story began spreading beyond town lines. Regional newspapers ran bold headlines: "Freshman vanishes near Forbidden Bridge." Online message boards filled with theories. Students whispered about a private science club known for secret leadership nights off campus. The name Aegis Lab Society appeared in several posts. Police noted it in their field report. "Unverified, pending confirmation of club event logs." University officials released a short statement. Bramble Ridge University continues to cooperate fully with law enforcement. But several students told reporters they were being advised not to talk about the case publicly. The silence only fueled more suspicion. By the fifth day, nearly 90 volunteers had joined the search. 8 K-9 units, 3 helicopters, and several civilian drones were used. The drone footage showed nothing unusual. No drag marks, no broken branches, no human activity in the restricted zone. Even sonar scans of the quarry ponds came back clean. Investigators returned again and again to the same spot. The frozen edge of Iron Gate Road, where Lily's phone had gone dark. Every lead ended there. After a week, frustration began to set in. The official report dated November 1st read, "No credible leads. Continued cold weather limiting search." The tone had shifted from urgent to resigned. One investigator told a local newspaper off record, "It's starting to look less like an accident and more like someone made her disappear." Theories divided the community. Some believed Lily had been abducted by someone she trusted. Others thought she might have walked away voluntarily, overwhelmed by school or isolation. Her parents rejected that idea immediately. There were no signs of depression, no evidence of planning, and her bank account remained untouched. Meanwhile, rumors about the university grew louder. Questions surfaced about the involvement of faculty, about whether any professors had hosted off-campus gatherings that weekend. Each inquiry was met with the same reply: no comment. After 7 days of searching, the ground froze. But as the searches ended, something else began. Quiet conversations, whispers of a secret night, a hidden group, and a professor who might have known more than he ever said. The first week of November brought no new clues. The official search was suspended, but the story refused to fade. Flyers still hung on lampposts. Reporters still called. For the Hart family, the word missing wasn't enough. They decided to take control of the investigation themselves. Michael and Diane Hart set up a private command center in their hotel room just outside campus. They printed satellite maps of the area, marking every coordinate the police had searched: the last phone ping, the quarry lodge, and the cliffs near Red Hollow Bluff. They launched a dedicated tip line and a public email account, offering a $40,000 reward for any credible information. Michael told reporters, "You don't have to give your name, just tell us what you know." Within days, the calls started. Most were dead ends, rumors, guesses, even pranks, but some sounded real enough to chase. The Bramble Ridge police assigned 2 officers to screen leads, prioritizing any that named a location, a vehicle, or a person. The volume of calls made it clear. People were talking. Local coverage spread to the state level. Then, national networks picked it up. The headline never changed: "College freshman vanishes after mysterious call." On TV, the Harts appeared together, holding Lily's photo, repeating one message: she didn't just walk away. By week 2, a different kind of chatter started surfacing online. Students began posting about a private academic club, Aegis Lab Society, connected to the university's engineering department. The posts described the group as elite, invitation only, with rumors of a leadership night that took place off campus. No one seemed to know who ran it, but a name kept coming up: Professor Victor Hale, a senior faculty member known for his strict mentorship style and close ties to high-performing students. One forum post mentioned a gathering at the Quarry Lodge on the weekend Lily disappeared. Another suggested it was part of a team-building test, Detectives flagged the rumor and made a note. Verify club logs, room bookings, off-campus permits. Hale was soon on their list of people to interview. 54 years old, respected, and known for shaping many of BRU's top graduates, he was the kind of figure students admired and feared in equal measure. Along with him were three of his senior mentees, Aaron Blake, Tessa Monroe, and Kyle Patel, all active members of Aegis Lab Society. When they appeared for questioning, each was accompanied by the university's legal representative. Their statements matched almost word for word. All four claimed to have been at separate locations between 9:30 and 11:30 p.m. the night Lily vanished, either studying, grabbing coffee, or visiting friends. Police checked the library and cafe cameras. Many had blind spots, and several were under maintenance that week. A few transactions showed purchases around that time but paid in cash. Nothing could verify who was actually there. Meanwhile, a parking attendant told investigators he saw a black SUV leaving the north gate shortly after 10 p.m., the same direction Lily had walked. He couldn't make out the license plate. That detail would linger, unconfirmed but impossible to ignore. Back in Lily's dorm, a forensic tech recovered a draft email from her. The first round of interviews covered everyone within reach. Jenna, her roommate, repeated the same statement. She said she was meeting someone from her department. That's all I know. Patrick UN, a student from her floor, confirmed seeing Lily heading downstairs. She looked focused, kind of in a hurry. A campus security guard recalled checking the camera feed later that night and spotting a single shadow moving toward the north gate at 9:47 p.m. The footage was too grainy for identification. Other students were less helpful. Some denied knowing her at all. Others spoke quietly about initiation games and night trials linked to the Aegis Club. None of it could be proven, but the whispers were enough to change the tone of the investigation. While the police pressed for evidence, the university tried to contain the noise. Bramble Ridge University issued a short statement. We continue to cooperate fully with law enforcement. Inside the faculty offices, an internal memo circulated. Professors were advised not to discuss the ongoing investigation during class. Several students noticed the sudden silence. One said, "It felt like everyone was pretending nothing happened." Each time members of the Aegis Club were called in, the same campus attorney arrived with them. Detectives later described it as coordinated. To the Harts, it looked like the school cared more about its image than about their missing daughter. As the weeks passed, investigators reconstructed the timeline minute by minute. At 9:35 p.m., Lily saved her essay on her laptop. At 9:40, she took the call. At 9:47, the library camera caught her heading toward the north gate. At 10:07, her phone signal ended near Iron Gate Road. Around midnight, a hunter reported hearing a faint cry near the quarry lodge, though no trace of it was ever found. By morning, she was gone. Detectives considered three possibilities. The first, an accident. She slipped and fell somewhere remote. But there were no tracks, no impact zone, and sonar sweeps turned up nothing. The second, a voluntary disappearance. Unlikely given her untouched wallet, ID. By early December, the posters around campus had begun to fade in the cold. The paper curled and darkened with moisture, but Diane Hart still replaced them every few days. She'd stand near the north gate as students passed, handing out small cards with Lily's photo. That winter, Bramble Ridge started to quiet again. The active search was over. The leads had gone thin, and investigators were beginning to feel the weight of something they couldn't yet prove. The case now straddled two lines, between truth and rumor, and between silence and control. And as more lawyers appeared in interviews, and one early news article about the Aegis Club quietly disappeared from the web, a new phase of the story began. The silence wasn't random anymore. It was coordinated, and the investigation was slowly turning toward a deadlock. By the end of the third week, the investigation had more questions than answers, and fewer people willing to ask them. Rumors had swelled, tips had thinned, and the official line barely moved. Then, almost overnight, the story started to disappear. Inside Bramble Ridge University, the tone shifted first. An internal memo went out to faculty. Do not discuss the case in class. The public statement from the school didn't change. Bramble Ridge University continues to cooperate fully with law enforcement. But the campus climate did. Flyers vanished from bulletin boards. Professors stuck to their lesson plans. Student groups were told to avoid speculation. One professor, who asked not to be named, later said, "We were told not to speculate. Just move on." Classes kept meeting. Lab sessions kept running. Lily's name stopped echoing in the places she used to walk. The press followed the silence. A local newspaper that had published the first detailed piece about the Aegis Lab Society quietly took the article down. The reporter who wrote it told a colleague, "We were told to focus on safer stories." Larger outlets looked away. There were no new interviews, no follow-ups, and no pressure briefings. Students whispered that the school had... The Hart family refused that quiet. Michael and Diane launched FindLily.org, built a public Facebook group, and organized a monthly candle vigil at the North Gate. In the snow, the same photo stood on an easel: green jacket, gray backpack, a careful smile. 1 year missing, the sign read when that first year passed. They wrote media advisories every few weeks and sent them to every newsroom that had ever returned a call. Most were ignored. People still showed up to the vigils: roommates, neighbors, a handful of freshmen who learned the story from older students. One participant said afterward, "It felt like only the family still believed she'd be found." Law enforcement was running out of ground. In March 2007, Bramble Ridge PD issued a short update. No credible leads. No forensic evidence recovered. Search funding was cut after 18 months. The file was shifted to inactive cold case status. The lead investigator transferred to another unit. The letter to the Harts used the familiar phrasing, "Case will remain open pending new evidence." But everyone understood what it meant on the ground. It wasn't closed, but it was over. People moved on. In 2008, Professor Hale retired early and left Pennsylvania. He purchased a small property in Maple Creek, New York, about 2 hours from campus. His name slid off departmental rosters. The 3 seniors closest to him left shortly after graduation: Aaron Blake to Texas, Tessa Monroe to Oregon, and Kyle Patel to Illinois. "It's like they scattered right after the storm," a former classmate said. None of them were contacted again by local reporters. Their names drifted out of campus talk and into old yearbooks. The erasure was slow, almost polite. The university's website made its old search updates harder to find. New students arrived with no memory of a missing freshman. Around town, people stopped bringing it up. "It just became one of those things you don't bring up anymore," a hardware store owner said. Threads on student forums dried up. FindLily.org dwindled to a few visits each month. Most autumns, the local paper printed a small line, 10 years since the disappearance, still unseen. Every year, Diane Hart came back to Pennsylvania. She walked to the quarry fence and the no trespassing sign that had faced more searchlights than anyone could count. She placed a candle under the post and stood beside it until it burned low. Some years, she left a small note. Still waiting, still looking. Neighbors grew used to it. Cars slowed and passed. Freshmen on their first winter at Bramble Ridge sometimes helped her light the wick and didn't know the full story. She'd thank them and say nothing else. The scene repeated, quiet, simple, stubborn. What remained was the freeze. Snow covered the quarry trail. Files gathered dust in metal drawers. Faith, even among those who cared, began to cool. The forensic summary for this period was concise and harsh. There was no admissible witness, no chain of evidence, and no institutional will. It wasn't the case that went cold, Nora would say years later. It was the people. None of this needed dramatic language to feel heavy. The timeline speaks for itself. First the interviews, then the lawyers. First the nightly searches, then the budget cuts. First the full front page, then the single sentence in a sidebar. What mattered to the Harts was that their daughter's trail had ended on a real road, near a real gate, in a real town, where real people walked by it every day. What mattered to investigators was that beyond that point, everything they could touch, texts, bank logs, cameras, soil, offered nothing. There was no memorial service on campus, no official plaque. Students graduated, new ones enrolled, and campus tours paused by buildings where Lily had taken her first classes without ever saying her name. The vacuum became its own kind of evidence of caution, evidence of deferral, evidence of the way institutions manage risk when answers are inconvenient or unclear. Yet some routines held. The family kept posting their monthly update online. A new photo from Lily's old camera, a short note about the last known route, a number to call if anyone remembered anything new. A few tips still arrived, mostly recycled versions of old rumors, whispers about a club, a night, a test. Detectives learned to tell the difference between a hunch and a lead. And for a long time there were no leads. By the 12th year, students used the Northgate path without thinking about the missing freshmen who once walked that way. The woods still cracked under ice in early winter. The quarry lodge sat behind its fence. The town lights blinked out one by one each night. What had started as a campus emergency had settled into a quiet fact of local life. Lily Hart was gone, and no one could say how or why with confidence. They could defend in court. The stalemate wasn't dramatic. It had no headline. It was the accumulation of small decisions, emails not sent, interviews shortened, questions deferred, budgets reallocated, attention pointed somewhere else. The Hart family counted the months anyway. They marked the calendar, flew across the country when they could, stood in the same places and asked the same questions, and went home with the same answers. There is a kind of honesty in naming what this period was, a pause that stretched into years. No arrests, no breakthroughs, no recovered items, no credible witness willing to stand under oath and point to a time, a place, and a person. Only a grid of search maps folded carefully in a box, a handful of statements that matched too neatly, and a mother who set a candle down, year after year, at a gate that didn't open. That is where the record sits at the end of this chapter. A cold campus, a closed rank, and a family holding the line against forgetting. The story did not end. It simply stopped moving. After 16 years, nothing had moved. The file sat cold, the maps were folded, and the last official update was more than a decade old. Then, out of nowhere, a single envelope landed on a desk at the Ohio Bureau of Investigation. No fingerprints, no return address. The handwriting was tilted, careful, and the message was only 12 words long. Check the old Hale orchard cistern. She didn't leave. It arrived on July 14, 2021. At first, investigators thought it was a hoax, just another cruel letter in a long-dead case. But one word stood out: cistern. That detail had never been released publicly. The only people who could have known about a water system on Hale's property were those close to him or to the original search. That one word was enough to move the case from forgotten to active again. Maple Creek, New York was a quiet farming town 2 hours from Bramble Ridge. The land once belonged to Professor Victor Hale, the same man whose name had appeared in the 2005 investigation. The OBI contacted Bramble Ridge PD and the Pennsylvania State Bureau of Investigation. Together they reassembled the old file, now labeled case number 2005-10-BRU-LILY. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Nora Briggs, the retired detective who had led the early search, was called back. Not as an officer, but as a consultant. She knew every timeline, every name, one agent said later. If anyone could see what we missed, it was her. The press got only one official statement. We're re-examining leads in a 2005 disappearance. No one mentioned the letter. The source was classified as confidential to protect whoever sent it. On August 3, 2021, the search team arrived at the former Hale orchard. The property had changed owners years ago, but the barn, the pasture, and a line of old apple trees were still standing. It was quiet, just the sound of wind through dry leaves and distant machinery. The K-9 units moved in first, trained cadaver dogs circling the perimeter. One stopped near the back of the barn, above a concrete slab that once held a cistern for collecting rainwater. The handler marked the spot. A second dog was brought in and showed the same reaction. Ground-penetrating radar was used to map the soil layers. The screen displayed a clear anomaly: disturbed earth, roughly 4 feet deep, right where the cistern had been filled in years before. Disturbance consistent with past burial, the forensic technician noted. That was all the team needed to start digging. On August 5th, they began the excavation under video supervision. 2 hours in, a shovel struck tarp. Old canvas, thick, industrial grade, folded around something heavy. Inside they found a human skeleton wrapped in layers of decayed fabric. Nearby, a navy blue hoodie with the BRU logo was still partially intact. On the ground above it, a weathered plank bore faint white paint. Maple Barn, 1989. Property records later confirmed that was the year Hale had built the structure. Forensic dentistry matched the teeth to Lily Hart's 2005 dental file. DNA from bone and hair sealed it. 99.9% certainty. 16 years after she walked out of Morton Hall, Lily had been found. The autopsy established a clear window. Time of death aligned with the night she vanished. The cause was blunt force trauma to the head, combined with hypothermia. There were no signs of restraint or sexual assault, but soil samples from the body suggested it had been moved after death. Dirt from two separate areas, the quarry region and the Maple Creek property, appeared on different layers of fabric. She was alive for a short time after the fall, the report read. Post-incident concealment evident. Word of the discovery spread faster than the investigators could contain it. Within hours, the first leak hit social media. Body found at former property of Professor Victor Hale. Local news stations camped outside the old barn. By the next morning, every major outlet had picked up the story. The headline was simple and brutal. Missing BRU freshman found 16 years later. The Hart family was flown to Harrisburg for a private briefing before the press conference. Michael and Diane Hart stood together, holding the small photo that had been on every poster back in 2005. Diane's voice shook when she spoke. We searched for 16 years. All it took was one brave letter. That line went everywhere. Within hours, the hashtag Justice for Lily began trending. Students held vigils outside Bramble Ridge University's front gate, lighting candles along the walkway. The story reached national television. What had been a cold case was now a breaking story. Meanwhile, investigators brought in the name at the center of it all, Victor Hale. Now 70, retired, living quietly in upstate New York. He was taken in for questioning but not charged. Hale said little, speaking only through his attorney. I am a scholar, not a criminal. I had nothing to do with any burial. His lawyer claimed the land had changed hands multiple times and that anyone could have buried something there after Hale left. Still, OBI agents filed for a full search warrant. They seized old academic records, a desktop computer from his storage room, boxes of documents, and a portable hard drive thick with dust. Every item was logged and sealed before being transferred to the FBI Cyber Division at Quantico for digital recovery. The community response was immediate. For people in Bramble Ridge, the old places suddenly felt haunted again. Iron Gate Road, Red Hollow Bluff, Quarry Lodge. Names that had faded from memory were back on television maps. We thought it was over, one resident said. Turns out, it was just buried. When Nora Briggs returned to the field, she stood near the barn where the remains had been found. She unfolded the search map she had drawn 16 years earlier. The Maple Creek area was right at the edge, just outside the jurisdiction line that limited her original search radius. We were always looking for a trail, she told a news crew later. Turns out, they drove her out. That detail, crossing state lines, had been enough to keep the original search from ever reaching the orchard. Now it was the most critical connection in the file. Nora helped compile a new list of individuals of renewed interest. At the top, Victor Hale and the 3 former students from the Aegis Lab Society. Their names hadn't been mentioned publicly in over a decade, but inside the task force, they became the focus of renewed questioning. For the first time in years, there was momentum, evidence, a direction. The silence that had surrounded Lily's case was breaking. What had once been whispers and rumor was now physical proof. The discovery at Maple Creek had transformed speculation into fact. As the excavation site closed for the night, Nora stood by the evidence table. She placed the anonymous postcard, still in its plastic sleeve, on top of the case file marked Lily Hart. The folder, once stamped Inactive 2007, was relabeled in black ink, Reopened 2021. It had taken 16 years, an unknown sender, and one short sentence to turn memory into evidence again. For the Hart family, it was the first real answer they had ever received. For investigators, it was proof that time doesn't always erase truth. It only buries it. And for the first time since that October night in 2005, the name Lily Hart was back in motion. If the ground told investigators where Lily was, the data dozens of devices were seized. The list included a 2005 tape backup of the Bramble Ridge University email server, an old desktop from the department's basement, 2 portable hard drives, and a sealed archive of student club equipment. Everything was logged, labeled, and hashed for integrity checks. Each chain of custody signature was captured on video. This time, the record itself would hold. Inside the evidence lab, technicians began the slow process of resurrecting the tape backup. The reels were fragile, the format obsolete. But after several days, the data came back online, raw emails, system logs, and internal memos from the fall semester of 2005. Among thousands of entries, one thread stood out. The subject line read, "Ravine Run, Field Night." The participants were 4 names the investigators already knew: Hale, Aaron Blake, Tessa Monroe, and Kyle Patel. The content was short and clinical. Hale's message said, "Keep the location off record. Control variables." Attached was a map of the Red Hollow Quarry area, exactly where Lily's scent trail had vanished that night. Headers and message IDs matched the university's original domain structure. The timestamps lined up perfectly with the hours Lily left Morton Hall. Audit logs showed Hale's faculty account active between 9:40 and 10:10 p.m., the same window her phone signal cut off near Iron Gate Road. Internal watermarks, metadata unique to the BRU mail system, proved the emails were native, not fabricated. Every technical mark pointed the same direction. Then came the network logs. A lab-issued laptop registered as part of Hale's department showed a GPS trail matching the route investigators had always theorized but never confirmed: Northgate to Iron Gate Road, and then, continuing beyond the state line, toward Maple Creek. Wi-Fi data from the campus network confirmed the device disconnected around 9:45 p.m., the exact time witnesses saw Lily walking north. "The data tells a route that matches the ground," one examiner said quietly. While the forensics team combed through backups, another find came from a recovered hard drive belonging to Tessa Monroe. Buried in her email folder was an unsent draft, saved automatically the night after Lily disappeared. It read, "We went too far. She fell. He said don't call." The message was never sent, but the metadata was undeniable. The file had been created and last modified within 12 hours of the incident. Its autosave journal proved it came from that night, unaltered since. In the physical evidence locker, investigators found the bridge between Bites and Dirt. The Aegis Club room, sealed since 2006, contained old rope used for field drills and a flashlight with a cracked lens. Lab results showed the rope carried a single strand of female hair. DNA matched to Lily Hart. The flashlight had traces of soil that, when analyzed, matched the mineral profile of the Maple Creek burial site. Records from the university's equipment log showed Lily had borrowed a high-power flashlight the same week she vanished. Bits and atoms told the same story. From Hale's office came something even harder to dispute: a notebook labeled Project Aegis, Leadership Assessment. In it were names of students next to handwritten notes. Under candidates, the initials LH appeared. On a later page, the line, "Control Variables, Quarry," was written beside a sketch of the ravine. For prosecutors, it showed design and authority, not an accident, but a system led by Hale himself. As the findings mounted, federal experts were brought in to validate each layer. They verified device IDs, server headers, login IPs, and file signatures. The deletion patterns themselves became part of the evidence. Hale's account showed selective erasures within 48 hours of the disappearance. Emails renamed, then manually wiped, but not fully overwritten. Low probability of fabrication under standard forensic tests, the official report concluded. What emerged was a pattern of obstruction. The same days that Hale and his students were first questioned in 2005, multiple attempts were logged to purge data from both his faculty drive and the club's shared storage. Some deletions failed, leaving partial fragments behind. The gaps in those files aligned exactly with the hours investigators believed Lily had been injured. It was less a random cleanup than a reaction to pressure. When agents finally mapped everything out, the story unfolded in clean, chronological order. At 9:35 p.m., Lily saved her last essay on her dorm laptop. Around 9:40, Hale's account came online from the department's server. Minutes later, a prepaid call reached Lily's phone. At 9:47, a security camera caught a lone figure heading toward North Gate. At 10:07, her phone signal vanished near Iron Gate Road. That same night, the lab laptop connected through mobile data on the road to Maple Creek. The next morning, an unsent confession appeared on Tessa's hard drive. Days later, the deletion attempts began. Every piece aligned: time, movement, and intent. For years, the Aegis Lab rumors had sounded like campus folklore. A leadership night in the woods, whispered among students, never proven. Now those whispers had an email header, a GPS. By the time the analysis was complete, investigators had not only a map of Lily's final hours, but a clear digital fingerprint of the people who controlled those hours. Each login, each deleted message, each piece of hardware told the same story of movement, opportunity, and concealment. As Nora Briggs reviewed the summary report, she said quietly, "We finally had time, place, and actors, and a moment when someone chose not to help." For all the complexity of the evidence, that was the heart of it. There had been a window to call for help, and someone had closed it. In the end, the charts on the wall connected every point: Hale to the Aegis emails, to the lab route, to the equipment room, to Maple Creek. The digital map wasn't theory anymore. It was proof. The data had given the case what it never had before: direction. And with the story now written in code and coordinates, the room for denial began to shrink. The next step wouldn't come from a hard drive or a timestamp. It would come from the people behind them. For 16 years, the case had no voices. Then, one of them finally spoke. The second round of interviews began with new leverage: emails recovered from 2005, a GPS route that reached Maple Creek, and physical evidence from a club room that no one had touched in years. Lawyers tried to split clients, delay dates, and shape answers. It didn't matter. Pressure had weight now. Under that weight, one person broke. Kyle Patel, 34, a software engineer living in Illinois, asked to meet with Nora Briggs. He arrived pale and restless, eyes moving from the floor to the door and back again. "I can't carry this anymore," he said. He asked to talk off the record, then signed the consent for recording. In the interview room, 2 investigators sat at the table, and Nora watched from behind the glass. Kyle took a breath and began to rebuild the night the file called Field Night. Aegis Lab Society had a tradition, he said, a secret orientation challenge called Ravine Run. It was sold as leadership, Find your way out of the dark with only a compass and a light. They loaded her into Hale's black SUV. Someone tucked jackets around her. Kyle kept his hand near her mouth to feel the breath. I kept checking if she was breathing, he said. She was. The drive out of Bramble Ridge was slow and quiet, the wheels hitting patches of thin ice. Past midnight, they crossed the state line. Close to 3 a.m, the car stopped behind an old barn in the orchard lot. Hale got out and turned to them. She's gone. We handle this ourselves. That sentence, Kyle said, was the moment everything crossed a line they could never step back over. Behind the barn was ground that used to hold a cistern. The concrete was broken, the soil soft from years of runoff. Hale told Aaron to find shovels. He told Tessa to bring the tarp from the supply bin. Aaron argued. Tessa cried. Hale's face hardened. You want to ruin your lives for one mistake. He promised expulsions, revoked scholarships, reports to every department chair. You'll never work in this field, he said. The threat worked. They dug. Kyle's voice shook when he described the rest. They carried Lily together. He kept saying he was sorry. After the burial, Hale gathered gear, a BRU hoodie, the cracked flashlight, rope from the club kit, stuffed it into a bag and told them to get back to campus and sleep. Class at 8, he said, as if routine could scrub a night clean. In the morning, the 4 of them met in the Aegis room. Hale spoke first. We never speak of this. She wandered off. That's all anyone needs to know. He used phrases that sounded noble: privacy, restraint, protecting reputations. But the message was one thing. Match your stories and say nothing else. It was like rehearsing a play, Kyle said. A week later, a message hit their inboxes, subject line, after quarry, with a reminder to clean devices and delete drafts. They did. Tessa saved a copy she later erased, but the fragments remained in her autosave logs for years, waiting for someone to bring them back. The investigators let the room go quiet when he finished. Then they started to line up his story with the record. When word reached Tessa Monroe that Kyle had confessed, she asked her attorney to set up a meeting. She walked in with a face that looked relieved and terrified at the same time, sat down, and confirmed the sequence point by point. She added one detail that turned a hard story into something harsher. She had taken out her phone to call 911 at the ravine, and Hale grabbed it from her hand. She had written the draft the next day and then deleted it after a meeting where, she said, he told them he could end their futures if they said a word. She signed her statement and left the room without looking back. Aaron Blake held out the longest. He denied the map, the drive, and the barn. But the after quarry email carried his device ID. The login records showed him on the same thread. Eventually, he admitted the challenge existed and that Lily had fallen, but he tried to put distance between himself and the decisions that followed. It didn't help. With 2 consistent statements and a full set of digital corroboration, the narrative wasn't coming from one witness. It was coming from the evidence, repeated. Prosecutors reviewed the file and prepared the charging documents. The language was plain. Involuntary manslaughter for the failure to seek aid when a duty of care existed. Obstruction of justice for coordinating deletions and false narratives. Abuse of a corpse for the burial behind the barn. Evidence tampering for the attempted purges and relocation of items. A judge signed the warrant. In Maple Creek, patrol cars rolled up to a quiet house off a county road. The porch light was on. Inside, Victor Hale appeared at the door in a sweater and slacks, expression flat. Officers moved in, read the warrant and handcuffed him. Red and blue washed across the front windows. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. "You'll never understand what it was really about," he said to the hallway, not to anyone in particular. Nora stood near the drive, arms folded against the cold. "It was about power," she said softly, "and the cost of silence." Back in Pennsylvania, the Hart family received the official call. The words were careful and direct. "We finally know what happened to our daughter." They flew in the next day, carrying the same photograph they had used on flyers in 2005. Lily smiling on a fall trail. Reporters gathered outside the station. The story was everywhere. Commentators repeated a line that spread fast: "Justice delayed is still justice." Another headline cut deeper. The cover-up lasted longer than her life. The town felt different that week. Students lit candles at North Gate. Alumni sent messages to the family. People who had stayed silent started emailing tips that had felt useless before. In the squad room, investigators cleared the board of question marks and replaced them with dates, names, and arrows. The gaps that had frozen in 2005 were filled with statements, logins, and timestamps. Every time someone had asked, "How could this happen?" the file now had an answer. An accident at the ravine. A window to call for help. A choice not to. A drive across state lines. A burial before dawn. And a system built to keep that night from being spoken aloud. Kyle signed his statement and looked like a man who had been holding his breath for years. "I helped carry her," he had said in the interview. "I can't unsee that." The line sat in Nora's notes like a weight. It captured the thing data can't show: the human cost of a decision to protect a name over a life. The case had not changed what happened on that October night. It had changed what could be proven. The confession didn't stand alone. It stood on the foundation of evidence. Emails, maps, logs, DNA, soil. Each piece testing and supporting the next. The story no longer relied on memory. It lived in records that outlasted fear, in files that had waited 16 years for someone to open them and listen. When the booking was done and the station went quiet, Nora walked past the evidence room and paused at the door. The boards on the wall no longer showed a single line stopping at Iron Gate Road. They showed a route that continued, decisions that compounded, and the names of people who had finally told the truth. The silence had ended the only way it ever could, by being replaced with words that matched the facts. For 16 years, the case had no voices. Then one of them finally spoke. The evidence had already formed a map: emails between 4 students and their professor, GPS data tracing a midnight route from Bramble Ridge to Maple Creek, DNA found on a rope inside an old campus lab. It all pointed in one direction. Now, the people behind those files were being called in for a second round of questioning. Their lawyers demanded separate rooms, no contact, no overlap. The silence that had protected them for years began to show its first cracks. The break came from Kyle Patel. 34 years old now, living in Illinois, a man who'd built a life on top of something he never buried deep enough. He asked to speak with Nora Briggs. When he walked into the interview room, he looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept through a night in years. He folded his hands, looked down, and said quietly, "I can't carry this anymore." He asked to speak off record, but after hearing his Miranda rights, he signed the consent form for recording. "It wasn't supposed to go that way," he began. His voice was steady, not dramatic, just the tone of someone done with pretending. He told them about field night. It wasn't a campus event, but a secret leadership test organized by the Aegis Lab Society, a club for top students in environmental engineering. They called the challenge Ravine Run. Each candidate was blindfolded and dropped near the quarry after dark, told to find their way back to the main road using only a compass and instinct. The faculty advisor, Professor Victor Hale, monitored the event with 3 upperclassmen, Aaron Blake, Tessa Monroe, and Kyle himself. Lily Hart was the only freshman. She had joined the program a week earlier and wanted to prove herself. She didn't know the quarry terrain or the cliffs near Red Hollow Bluff. She was laughing, Kyle said. It was supposed to be fun. Then we heard the scream. She had stepped too close to the edge, slipped down a rocky slope about 15 feet. When Aaron and Kyle reached her, she was conscious but disoriented with a small cut on her head and a weak pulse. "She was alive," he said. "I told Hale we needed an ambulance." Hale arrived with a flashlight, knelt beside her and checked her breathing. Then he stood up and made the decision that changed everything. No cops. No campus. If this leaks, Aegis is done. He ordered them to carry her out. He said she just needed warmth and rest, that they'd take her to his property at Maple Creek to recover. They obeyed. Lily was lifted into Hale's black SUV, wrapped in jackets and blankets. The night was dropping below freezing. As they drove, Kyle said he kept a hand near her face, checking for breath. "She was breathing," he said. She wasn't. They reached Maple Creek around 3 a.m. The barn stood behind Hale's orchard, quiet, surrounded by frost. When they stopped, Hale got out, looked into the back seat and said flatly, "She's gone. We handle this ourselves." Behind the barn was a broken cistern and a patch of soft earth. By sunrise, they were back on campus. Hale called a meeting in the Aegis room. He told them, "We never speak of this again." She wandered off. That's all anyone needs to know. He walked them through a script, phrases to use if questioned, ways to sound concerned but uninvolved. "It felt rehearsed," Kyle said, "like he'd done this before." A week later, an email appeared from Hale's account, subject line, "After Quarry." The message read, "Clean up devices. Delete all drafts." The students followed instructions. Tessa saved 1 copy of a draft she'd written the night after Lily's disappearance, then deleted it in panic. That deleted file, recovered 16 years later, became one of the key pieces of evidence tying their story to the night Lily died. Investigators began to check every detail of Kyle's confession. The route he described matched perfectly with GPS data from a university laptop used that night. The emails about Ravine Run, field night, were verified through digital headers and timestamps. The soil sample from the club flashlight matched the mineral composition of the Maple Creek burial site. The rope found in the storage closet carried a single hair that matched Lily's DNA. The autopsy confirmed head trauma and hypothermia as the cause of death. Every timestamp, every physical trace aligned with Kyle's statement. "Every variable fit," Nora said later. It wasn't rumor anymore. It was record. When news of the confession reached Tessa Monroe, she called her lawyer and offered to cooperate. Her account matched Kyle's exactly. She added one crucial detail. She had tried to call 911 at the ravine. and Hale snatched the phone from her hand. She admitted writing the unsent draft that read, "We went too far. She fell. He said don't call." Aaron Blake resisted longer. He denied the challenge, denied the drive, denied knowing anything about Maple Creek. But the after-quarry email carried his device ID and login trace. Every denial fell apart under the weight of the digital record. As one investigator put it, the silence started to crack, and once it did, it didn't stop. The prosecutors reviewed the timeline, the confessions, and the recovered data. A judge signed the arrest warrant for Professor Victor Hale on 4 charges: involuntary manslaughter, obstruction of justice, abuse of a corpse, and evidence tampering. Early that morning, police cars rolled down a dirt road outside Maple Creek. The lights reflected off the orchard windows. Hale opened the door in a sweater and slacks, calm and unreadable. Officers read him his rights and placed him in handcuffs. The barn where Lily had been buried was visible behind him through the fog. A reporter shouted a question as he was led away. "Do you have anything to say?" Hale looked straight ahead and said only, "You'll never understand what it was really about." Nora Briggs stood near the patrol car, hands in her coat pockets. "It was about power," she said quietly, "and the cost of silence." A few hours later, the Hart family received the call they had waited for since 2005. The voice on the other end said, "We finally know what happened to your daughter." They flew to Pennsylvania the next morning carrying the same photograph they had printed on missing posters years before. The headlines spread across the state. "Justice delayed is still justice." One journalist wrote, "The cover-up lasted longer than her life." After 18 years, the story of Lily Hart was no longer a mystery. It was a documented crime, planned, concealed, and finally confessed. And for the first time since that October night, the silence surrounding her disappearance was broken, not by rumor or hope, but by the truth. The emails gave the timeline, the GPS gave the route. In court, the question was intent, knowledge, control, and the choice to conceal. By early 2023, Victor Hale had been indicted on 4 counts: involuntary manslaughter, obstruction of justice, abuse of a corpse, and evidence tampering. The trial was held in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Cameras were restricted, but key digital evidence was cleared for display: printouts of old emails, GPS maps, forensic photos of the barn. Every item carried a date, a signature, or a trace that spoke louder than memory. The prosecution's theory was simple. Hale created and supervised a dangerous initiation he called Field Night. He knew Lily Hart was still alive after she fell, blocked his students from calling for help, moved her body to his own property, buried her, and erased the evidence. They framed the case around 3 words: knowledge, control, concealment. They didn't need to prove intent to kill. They only needed to show reckless decisions and deliberate cover-up. One by one, the state lined up its evidence: the Ravine Run Field Night email chain, the after-quarry cleanup message, Hale's Aegis notebook marked LH candidate, the GPS route from campus to Maple Creek, the rope with Lily's hair, the flashlight dusted with matching soil, and the autopsy confirming both head trauma and hypothermia. The defense countered with accident and panic. They argued this was a tragic accident turned chaotic, that Hale's students had fractured memories, and that their confessions were shaped by leniency deals. They called him a scholar who made a medical misjudgment, not a criminal who ordered a burial. They said the data was misread, the digital evidence incomplete, and the chain of custody stretched too thin after 18 years. The defense's refrain was clear. Panic is not malice. But before testimony began, prosecutors built a wall of procedure. They presented chain of custody logs, every item sealed, numbered, transferred, and hashed with SHA 256 verification. Photos of evidence bags bore signatures and timestamps. They even played clips from the 2021 excavation, showing GPR scans and the recovery process. The goal was to show continuity. Nothing in this case had been doctored, moved, or mislabeled. Then came the witnesses. An FBI cyber forensics expert walked the jury through how the 2005 backup tapes were restored. He verified that Hale's emails and the after-query message had matching message IDs, internal watermarks, and sender device tags. Independent logs told the same time story, he said. A university IT administrator confirmed Hale's account was active between 9:40 and 10:10 p.m., the precise window Lily left her dorm. A digital geolocation analyst mapped the recovered GPS path from a BRU lab laptop, showing a line that began at North Gate, past Iron Gate Road, and ended near Maple Creek. Then came the trace analysts. A forensic geologist testified that soil from the flashlight found in the Aegis Club matched the mineral pattern at the Maple Creek barn. A rope recovered from the same closet held a single strand of hair that matched Lily's DNA. "Bits and atoms align," he said, quoting his own report. The medical examiner took the stand next. He described the fatal combination: head trauma from a fall and rapid hypothermia. She could have survived if medical help had come in time. "There was a window," he said. "Not large, but real." The search and recovery lead explained the excavation in 2021. A tarp, a hoodie with the BRU logo, and disturbed soil exactly where the anonymous letter had said. Every detail, depth, composition, coordinates, matched Hale's old property records. Then the human testimony. Kyle Patel recounted that night step by step. The blindfold test, Lily's scream, her pulse, and Hale's order: no cops, no campus. He described loading her into the SUV. The defense cross-examined hard. They claimed the digital logs could have been spoofed or corrupted over time. They argued the GPS margin of error could be miles, not meters. They painted Kyle and Tessa as desperate to save themselves, rewriting history to shift blame. They suggested the burial could have been handled by others after Hale left town. But each claim fell under the weight of overlapping records, independent data points that refused to disagree. Midway through the trial, Hale himself took the stand. He admitted creating the leadership challenge, but said it was meant as a team-building exercise. He admitted moving Lily, but claimed he believed she had already died. He called the burial a misguided act of panic, not concealment. When pressed on the emails, he said, "After quarry," referred to project data cleanup, not a crime. The prosecution confronted him with the Aegis notebook listing LH under candidates, and with soil and DNA linking his barn to the body. They asked one question. "You said no cops. Why?" Hale's only reply: "It would have destroyed everything we built." The final week turned to closing arguments. The prosecution walked the jury through the pattern: Hale's knowledge of injury, his control over the students, and his decisions to conceal. Knowledge, control, concealment. Those three choices ended a life. The defense urged reason. This was panic, not purpose. A mistake, not malice. You don't destroy a man's life for a misjudgment. After 2 days of deliberation, the verdict was read. Guilty. On all 4 counts. The courtroom fell quiet. Lily's parents sat holding hands, no celebration, just long-held exhaustion. Nora Briggs later said, "It wasn't victory. It was verification. The record finally matched the truth." At sentencing, the judge called Hale's actions an abuse of trust and authority that placed pride over human life. He received 23 years with no early parole recommendation. In the weeks that followed, Bramble Ridge University issued a formal apology. The president announced the creation of the Lily Hart Foundation, funding scholarships in environmental science and anti-hazing education. New policies were drafted. Mandatory 911 protocol, advisor audits, registration of all club activities, and anonymous reporting channels. Across Pennsylvania, lawmakers proposed stricter penalties for failure to render aid in hazing contexts. Students on campuses began quoting a new phrase on posters and rallies. "If you see danger, don't stay silent." The defense filed an appeal, arguing prejudicial use of digital exhibits and biased interpretation of the after-quarry email. The appellate court upheld the conviction, citing consistent evidence and a verified chain of custody. In the end, the case that began with missing person flyers ended with a record: names, times, data, and decisions preserved for history. A jury didn't convict on rumor. They convicted on records that agreed, one after another, until no silence could survive. After the verdict, the noise dropped fast. Victor Hale was led into custody. Headlines thinned. For the first time in 18 years, the Hart family was allowed to grieve without asking for updates or permission. Lily's body returned to San Diego. Her parents stood at the airport cargo bay and said quietly, "We can finally bring her home." After 18 years of questions, the truth finally had a name, a record, and a resting place. The burial was simple. A small chapel near Pacific Beach, autumn light through plain glass, family and close friends in the pews. Beside the coffin sat her battered field map, her camera, and a pressed maple leaf from Pennsylvania. The priest's last words were direct. She's back where her journey began. No speeches, no dramatics. Just a long moment of stillness. Diane Hart broke that silence with what became the family's definition of closure. Closure doesn't mean forgetting. It means the truth stopped running from us. Back in Pennsylvania, the campus faced what it had ignored. The BRU chapel bell tolled at noon. Students and faculty filled the green. Lily's photo stood 10 feet high, captioned with a line that cut through excuses. Class of 2009. Gone, but never forgotten. Jenna Miles stepped to the microphone and said, "She deserved better friends, and a campus that didn't turn away." The university president apologized and admitted institutional silence. A granite stone was unveiled on the lawn, etched with "Truth requires courage" and an anti-hazing pledge. Candles were lit and held without words. Accountability, not performance, defined the day. The family turned grief into work. The Lily Hart Foundation launched with 2 clear goals: scholarships in environmental science and real anti-hazing advocacy. Its slogan, BRU moved from apology to policy. Within 6 months, Every student club and event required registration. Faculty advisors faced annual reviews with automatic removal for violations. A 911 protocol removed any need for prior approval. Any student or staff could call in an emergency, period. An anonymous whistleblower hotline tied directly to campus safety opened, with mandatory response timelines. A new institute, the Hart Center for Ethical Leadership, began teaching safety ethics, reporting duties, and moral accountability, crossing engineering, law, and student life. The school's council summed up the pivot. We can't undo what happened, but we can make sure there's never another unreported night. The impact widened beyond one campus. Pennsylvania lawmakers held hearings on off-campus initiations and failures to render aid. Bills were introduced to strengthen penalties when help wasn't called and harm followed. Several universities formed a shared misconduct network, the Campus Integrity Alliance, designed to prevent problem groups from reappearing across town under new names. National shows told the full arc, Dateline, True Crime Daily, reframing the narrative from a mysterious call to a documented concealment and a preventable death. Student associations adopted an annual campaign, No Silent Nights, banning secret initiations and pledging mandatory intervention in emergencies. Media attention didn't just memorialize, it taught. Documentaries and podcasts laid out the evidence chain and gave credit to quiet persistence. Law and forensics programs built case studies around the investigation, focusing on tape restoration, metadata, and the merge of digital and physical proof. Op-eds in higher ed journals pressed a new definition of institutional negligence. Not only what leaders do, but what they choose not to do when action could save a life. The public started to see silence as complicity, not neutrality. Investigators closed their own loop. Nora Briggs donated her case journals, search maps, and field notes to the Pennsylvania Cold Case Archive, with one line taped to the box. Every file deserves an ending. This one finally got it. Maple Creek evidence was preserved for training, labeled Case Closed, Convicted. At state seminars, the team walked through the lessons. Preserve legacy media, verify headers and device IDs, track custody without gaps, and always test the story against independent datasets. The message was practical. Evidence ages, but process keeps it honest. One question stayed on the edge of the story: the anonymous letter. The sender's identity remained sealed by court order. Nora's answer, when asked if she needed to know, was steady. Someone finally broke the chain of silence. That's what mattered. One act, 12 words, and the ground beneath a barn gave back the truth. The broader truth sits outside any courtroom. In 2005, silence looked like policy. In 2023, it reads like a violation. Student handbooks now carry duty of care language. Advisors are trained to call first and answer questions later. Club charters are audited, and event logs are checked. In classrooms, case files and flowcharts replace rumor. Lily's name has become shorthand for accountability. Proof that systems change only when someone refuses to stay quiet. The legacy moved into habit. The Lily Hart Foundation published the Hart Guidelines, a clear checklist for preserving evidence and acting fast on risk, shared with campuses and police departments nationwide. An annual Lily Hart lecture brings voices from ethics, forensics, and campus safety into one room. Universities run incident simulations to train deans and advisors to do the simple, brave thing: Pick up the phone. Each fall, the Harts return to Bramble Ridge for the vigil. The bell is soft, the lawn is clean. The memorial stone is cool under a hand. Diane says, "Closure isn't peace. It's accountability." Students place small lights along the path toward Northgate. The walk Lily never finished, now lit in a line that anyone can follow. It does not undo the harm. It shows what to do next time. The vanished freshman of Bramble Ridge was never just about what one man did. It was about what everyone else didn't do. If you see danger, speak. If they don't listen, speak again. Silence doesn't protect anyone. Intentionally hides the truth a little longer. If this story mattered to you, share it. Like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below on how campuses should change. Your voice pushes this conversation forward, and it might be the one that saves someone when it counts.